am excited. Remember, I told you last week that these two books were available for you. Mission Minded Leaders, written by Dr. Barry Cook, and this one, Establishing Your Course. This is very good. Both of them are great, but this one, Establishing Your Course. And I hear so many people saying they don't know how to get to where they're going and all of that. And he gives some real real tools and things that are written. Even the way he writes his books, I think, are very good. He and Pastor Lanzine kind of write alike. You know, they make sure that you understand the parts of it. So it's Dr. Barry Cook, and you can go ahead and get it on Amazon.com. And you'll be able to get those things. So I'm not going to take up any more of that time. What I am going to do is to bring my guest on, my friend and fellow council member, and all of that. We serve together. We enjoy each other. So
praise God.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you again in a tremendous subject, talking about the oppression of women. No, that's not the title, but
people, I want to let you know, I got his commitment that this is going to be a 6-part series. So I have his commitment.
It's all good. I love it. Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So go ahead.
I love the subject. As we were talking about last time, and we were talking about kind of leaving off in the scriptures that we're dealing with women being quiet in the church and is keeping quiet and that kind of thing. And we're talking from different portions of scripture on the subject. Of course, the two main ones being in 1 Corinthians, and then also in Paul writing to Timothy about the subject. And we were dealing with the text in those times, and we were also we left off talking about the negative thing about the women in the coming into the church at Corinth and in Ephesus were coming as from being temple prostitutes and in training for that and participating in that and being sent out regionally, which I think is funny that's why the early church people were so open to evangelistic concepts and apostolic concepts, because I was reading, just thinking about how they were sending. I know this is a side note, but I'm reading church history and preparing for this, and I'm thinking about how that they would train the women to be, and then they would literally pair them with old and young, and then they would send them out for their experience in the field, so to speak, to usually a royalty or somebody that paid to have them come, and how they would come. And I was sitting there thinking, and they had a job and a role to do to kind of mix their religion into their visit, which was interesting. And I thought, why do Christians have trouble mixing the gospel up in what they're doing? Because the devil mixes his, it might be subtle, it might be clear, but it's mixed up in everything. Yet we sat over here talking about, and he tells us we need to be calm, so we be calm, which is the same thing that we're telling the women in the church. Y'all need to shut it. And that's what we were dealing with. And so you asked me the question, what about this? The women need to, be in subjection, to the men. Okay, the word there, hupotasso, hupo, under, and tasso, to arrange. So in the context, Paul was basically, it speaks in a marriage relationship. But as you notice, when you look up the word, it's also used metaphorically in the covenant that one makes with the local church. So that's interesting too, because again, I'm thinking, why of all these preachers that I've heard preach on this text not bring I know they're looking up the word because they're given one definition, but these other three they're not even talking about, which is the Greek word, what makes up the whole word, the etymology of a word. Almost every word, just for those who don't know, etymology means it's made up of 2 or 3 words, and over time it was one word, and then another word was added to it, and then another word was added to it. So we have dependent, and then codependent, and then, whatever. I mean, these words begin to be attached to it. It makes up a word, and that's the etymology, or where a word came from. So when we break it down, we can look at the reason in the Greek or Hebrew, if you're familiar with that, or even in the English language or Latin or whatever you're looking up, it'll have 2 or 3 definitions based on, and if you get a good etymology book, it'll show you what year and why the word was added to it. So that's how language comes along. So Paul was using the term subjection, which was a Greek word that meant under, to arrange, meaning keep under the order of the meeting and stay in an orderly fashion, and we'll get to you. I mean, it's not a rebuke, it's not a demeaning language. It's basically like you in the getting the DMV. That's a beautiful, wonderful thing, especially in California. And all of these people are coming out, and the lady yells out, "Y'all need to stay in line and wait on your number to be called, please. Thank you. We'll be
I
with
think you need to
you
repeat
shortly."
that. You need to repeat that. You need to go back and repeat that, because I don't think people heard this. This is why I actually studied, and I actually decided that I'm not going to live that way, because I didn't come into this to live. I mean, I came, before the day before I gave the Lord my life, I mean, I came from an orgy. So, it was no order.
Yeah.
and
There you
I'm
go.
in this to go ahead and let somebody tell me who I was, how I was supposed to be, and how I was supposed to act or not act. Okay. Because it did not tell me that I was to have a total makeover in that manner.
Right.
And what you just said is something I think is missing from male and females, that they don't get that. So that part about
Yeah. And we had
the
just gone over in the first program in the last week, we talked about, the word silence, being silent in the church. So I don't want to go back through that. But, Paul, the illustration that I was giving about the word subjection is like being in the DMV and the lady saying, "Excuse me, I told you I'll call you as soon as your number comes up. We're on number 314 right now, and if you will sit down and wait patiently, we will get to you shortly." That doesn't mean you have to get out of line. That doesn't mean you can't get your driver's license. That doesn't mean they rebuked you and you're not allowed to drive, and they did it because you was a female. No, that's not why. It's because you're distracting everybody and they can't get it. They already told you what they told you, and you're running your mouth. Hold on. We'll get to you, but we got to get to everybody. I mean, that's the word that was used for subjection. Come under our objective. This is a body ministry right now. And the word home, when he said, "Ask your own husband a home," the word home means in your private time with your spiritual advisor, ask them the questions you need to ask them. I mean, it's just amazing how we bent that into this oppressive oligarchy, with men and women. It means
perfect word.
it means she shall not exert her rights or do whatever she feels, literally, but yield to the preference of what is going on, the objectives of the moment. So come under those objectives and then arrange yourself under them. So what do you need to do? Write it down? Do you need to go, signal to somebody and meet them outside? What do you, whatever but don't mess up the whole thing, because that's going on. So that's what she's talking about. And then in verse 12, can I keep going? What's that? This is, by the way, I know I said it before, but let me say it again. This is 1 Timothy 2, 11 and 12 that I'm walking down through. "Let the women learn in silence with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." So that's what we're dealing with. That's a bad scripture, ain't it? I just love talking about this kind of stuff, because people just like, well, there's nothing to say. It says it plain and simple. Really? Let's look at it. Let's look at it together. I've seen it. I know I've preached it for years. I'm like, I know, but it's just appease me because I'm new at this. Let's just do it one more time. So the word man, the Greek word anir, speaks of a man. So many expositors, when they're breaking this down, say that it is more expressly speaking of the husband or the covering, the covering. The Pauline epistles uses this word 50 times. Think about that. Times that we're seeing the word husband sometimes, it's meaning something different. It's meaning your spiritual people that are over you in the Lord, that you covenanted with to let them disciple you.
That's right.
Or have been assigned to disciple you, whatever the case may be. But your will has to be involved or you're not going to listen. You'll be stubborn the whole time. So anyway, the Pauline epistles uses 59 times, 34 of which King James translations translates it husband.
Mm-hmm.
Of the remaining 25 occurrences, 18 are cases where the text is clearly speaking of a husband, a physical a husband. But most of the time that it's used, it's meaning covenant, someone that you have covenanted to disciple, your spiritual leader or mentor in the Lord. So I've heard people say sometimes, yes, but he says that elders are men. I'm like, did you look up the word men in that sentence? Because it is one sentence that it says, and let those men rule and let the men rule well. So he talking just to men because that's all that can do it. But the word men doesn't mean men; it means mature, those that are matured. And he uses a specific word of maturation. So he's speaking of it's talking about, look, if they're not I was about to say jujitsu, they're not a purple belt or above, they're not supposed to be, which is the top three, purple, brown, and black. So if they're not a purple belt, at least then they shouldn't even they shouldn't be up there. That's all he's saying by man. That means they're mature. Let them teach the class. Let them go first. If there's one of those in the room, let them go first, unless they want you to go and they're going to coach you through it.
That's right.
But they're still the one in charge of what's going on. I mean, that's 1 Corinthians also. So let's take the word usurp authority. Can we do that one?
Sure. Do it.
And usurp authority. The Greek word there is authentio. This means it's only used once, and it means to seize or to take hold of possessions by force or without a right.
Whoa, okay.
Various traits. So apparently some of these women were fairly aggressive in wanting their rights in the middle of service and are wanting their question answered by God right now. Mm-hmm. I don't care who cares what I'm saying. I'm telling you, I want my question answered now. I'm leaving this place. And you know what they're going to say? Thank you very much. Could you sit down, please? Oh, you don't want to answer me because I'm a woman? No, what they're saying, quit disrupting the whole DMV. Sorry.
That's right.
That's
right.
You're gonna get Pokey about to come and talk to you next. And then I don't like that. Get that off of me. Okay. But the word means an NAS Bible said exercise authority. To have authority, to rule over, to claim authority. These are different versions that translated it, to dictate to issue commands, to lord it over. So these guys was commanding folks, dominating the side. That ain't right. That's not right. Okay, well, in those times, they often let people give discourse back, and then they responded. Unlike us today, it was very common in there if someone genuinely had a question where they blurted out something that the speaker would say, no, that's a good question. I mean, when you read those old writings, it happened. I was sitting there thinking sometimes, my God, that went on and on. No wonder their services were 3 hours.
No wonder Paul. No wonder Eutychus, whatever his name is, fell out the window.
Yeah. He fell asleep.
Go down and bring his behind back up there, and then kept on.
I know, but basically that word means don't domineer the service. That's what it comes from. Don't domineer the service. Quit trying to be the authority over the service because you have a question. Work with each other. Come under what's going on and arrange yourself accordingly, which I just love that because it puts a whole nother slant on it. And again, people say, well, I don't believe that. Then look at the different texts where Paul wrote, the same person who wrote these texts wrote about women prophesying in church, women preaching about him, acknowledging the women in the book of Acts for their different roles and their different leadership roles, their pastoral roles, their deaconess roles, their elder roles. I mean, elder was never about a man or woman ever in history until the church, like I taught in the last one, until the church broke up at that council at Laodicea, and they made that decision. And they oftentimes the Roman church at that time, I chose my words carefully, would when they were in the middle of a battle or a fight against certain heresies, they would find a way to negotiate a position that would be similar to the heresy, but would give them a separate identity, like the worship of Mary. I mean, when you read that and you read about the council meetings when that came in and the purpose it came in, they were trying to be distinct among the regions, but they were having trouble advancing it. So they took the predominant pagan worship at the time where they were trying to progress, and they adopted their belief in this type of, so people like, oh, okay, well, it's similar to ours, we'll come on over. So it was a tactic that worked. I mean, some of the good things about it are like Christmas, and people say it was a pagan holiday and all that. Yeah, but again, the Catholic Church played chess with these people, just like Halloween was the day of Reformation. And I mean, the Catholic Church wasn't excited about that. But when they took over Halloween, it was a worship of the dead, similar to some of the Hispanic things with Dia de los Muertos or whatever it is, and the Day of the Dead, it was a worship of the dead. And so they're responding to it with, okay, we're going to make it a holy day. We're going to make this a holy day. And so we're going to make it the birth of Jesus. We say that, but they would trump Easter. Like they took Easter and say, Easter ain't about I know, but they took the pagan practice and then trumped it with their own, saying, no, that was Jesus. And the egg was Jesus, and then this was the bunny rabbit meant new life, and Christmas tree means we're all trees of righteousness, and the gifts hanging off underneath it have to do with all the gifts that God gives us, and the balls and decoration hanging down has to do with how God makes beauty out of ashes, out of our life, and and everybody said, "Oh, Merry Christmas, praise God," and the pagans went, "Doggone it." They did it again. But the problem is they're every time they're doing it, they're compromising and they're writing it down. Now, the same thing happened with women. They made a decision when they took over the church and formed the church to stop. The problem was they were the predominant movement of the church during that time in an organized way. But they were never the only church in the earth. And all the other movements had women leaders. Had at all levels, because it wasn't about male or female. So when you get the message of Christ, when you see the message of the kingdom, you don't argue from that standpoint anymore. You try to figure out what's in you that you don't know and where you've been lied to. And that's easy to find when you start thinking from the kingdom side instead of that old antiquated wineskin.
Okay. How are we? Because I find, and I know it's hard for you to believe, but I find that sometimes as a woman that I can get attacked from other women because I'm actually free. I mean, well, we work together, and we don't. I mean, what you see is what you get. That's the way you are. That's the way I am. I mean, really, what you see is what you get. And they say I don't have filters or whatever, but we find that women are really against women and what it is that God meant, that Jesus meant for them in the beginning? Or is this just a fantasy that I mean, is this just something that I'm dreaming? The insecurity and in this, because even though you have eloquently spoken and shared this and references history, all of this, biblical things, all of it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, do you find or do you see that this is a difficult part in order for women and men to accept? So now,
Yes,
quiet while
I do, and I do think there's a couple reasons why. And I think one of the main reasons is, number one, that's what we've been predominantly taught. We've been taught certain systems and boundaries, and like it's like the old elephant story or the flea story. They talk about where if you take a flea, and the flea has ability to jump 35 inches in a single jump, but you put it in a mason jar with a lid, it'll bang its head until that's all, it'll only jump right below that lid, and you eventually can screw the lid off and the flea won't jump out. It'll eventually die in that, unless you feed it or whatever fleas eat. But you'll die. In the same story with the elephants, that's how they train the elephants when they're a baby. They tie their foot to a pole, and eventually they untie their foot from the pole, and the elephant doesn't leave the area because it's been conditioned by that pole. Not too bright, but if it ever has a flea day, meaning it not a flea like what I was just talking about, but it takes off running for some reason, it's going to realize why it's running. Like, hey, I'm free. Yeah. That's why sometimes tribulation in our lives causes us to awake. We take off running from something going on, and finally we get out of the perimeters of our old mindsets, and we can see clearly enough. And I think there's a lot of people that are stuck in those old paradigms. Sometimes the men want to keep women like that. Sometimes the women are comfortable because they feel like they're able to keep an identity because they don't feel like they have skills outside of that or whatever. And I'm not all women, but there are some women like this. And I met them like, yeah, but that's okay if that's what you do in the home. That goes back to that co-laboring thing. But that you have lesser value, or what you let him say. See how clean he keeps the house. I guarantee he ain't gonna. That won't last long. Very few. See how well he take care of that baby. I mean, 2 or 3 days of it, maybe a week of it. It's probably all he's got. He'd be willing to pay you to get back out. Maybe that's what you ought to do. Like your little offering will go up a little, your allowance or whatever it is. But I mean, there's got to be a money. And I love the situation where I heard one pastor say in I can't remember his name. He's an old timer now. Pastor Cherry. He was from up north. Missionary Baptist guy, but
I know him. Uh-huh.
Yeah, oh my God. He telling the story one time, and he says, it's like this. He goes, when I sit down with a couple, I say, what you gonna do? And a man will say to me, well, she just gonna be in the house. Okay, well, what's she gonna do? Well, she'll clean the house and she'll make the food. And he sat there and he'll log it all, put it in current, like if you were to hire to do the task, and he'll sit there and so you'll be paying her this much a month. That'd be $2,003 a month. And then they're like, he's like, no. I mean, that's what she's got. I know, but this is what she's bringing in. This is the value she's bringing is $2,300. So when you say she don't do nothing, okay, so let's tell her, honey, you just go ahead and stop tomorrow. Don't do none of that for him no more. Now what? Well, I'm gonna kick her out, but she had your babies. What's that worth? You just watch he's like, he just laugh. He say, you should see those men's heads trying to figure out how to lie around all that.
It is.
But the point he was trying to make is, even if that's your position, there's a value exchange. And that's what it comes down to.
Yes.
If nobody's willing to make a value exchange, then we got an issue, whether you in the kingdom of God or whether you up in a relationship. I mean, so you telling me what do you have? I don't have nothing, but they better have this, 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 and this. What's that old saying we used to say? What'd you bring into the table?
That's it.
Well, I'm bringing me. Okay. Okay, my money, and you have to, you're coming because you want my money. So let's see, mine is increasing in value. It'll be worth this much in 20 years, and yours is decreasing. So it goes down in value. So you'll even be worth less in 20 years based on your looks alone. That's what you're telling me. That's all you bringing is hips, lips, and fingertips. Sorry, I'm all, anyway, anyway. You just gonna let me carry on too? You crazy girl? You just
We're a lot alike. Okay.
hey, I'm telling the truth.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. But one of the things. Here's the other part. In the Word of God, it talks about something else that we're going to hit, and we won't be able to deal a whole lot with it today.
Let's do it.
For youth, it says for children, obey your parents in the Lord. Now, who are they talking to? And under there, they're talking about the actual biological parents, but it's not the same thing. There's two different entities. There's things with fathers. And remember, in our conference, in the last conference we had, we started off. I spoke on the fact that in a female body, I am still a father in the kingdom. That there has nothing to do with gender, but it has to do with his heart. It has to do with his mind. It has to do with the position in which he put me. And so, in this, it's actually, do you find that we take and we want to put gender to everything, that there is no place to walk in the realm of the spirit and do what needs to be done?
Yes. Yeah, we do. We've got an issue. We have an issue with that kind of stuff, as a people of God. I mean, we have an issue, it's just, I mean, we could get off on talking about, the black church and the white church and all that stuff. It's the same concept. It's the same concept. It's like, okay, I understand that you might mean a cultural difference or expressional difference or practice difference, but that's not necessarily white or black or whatever.
Barry, guess what?
Stupid.
Out of time. Anyway.
Oh, shoot.
Well, we're going to be back next week. Apostle Barry is going to be back with me next week, and we're going to talk more about this the next 2 weeks. We are going to talk more about this, and if you have questions, please send them in. Ask us the questions, and we will answer them.
We'll answer them.
Be back next time when we're here to tell it like it is, the kingdom way. Thank you. And